Barack Obamas mand til en toppost i efterretningstjenesten har trukket sig. Han beskylder den israelske lobby. Charles Freeman var ellers udpeget til at lede det nationale efterretningsråd, men han er blevet skarpt kritiseret for tidligere kritiske udtalelser om Israel. Nu beskylder Freeman den israelske lobby i USA for at have spændt ben for ham. Freeman er tidligere ambassadør i Saudi-Arabien og har stillet spørgsmålstegn ved den amerikanske støtte til Israel. Tidligere i dag talte vi med den anerkendte professor Stephen Walt, medforfatter til den kontroversielle bog The Israel Lobby and US Foreign Policy, en bog, der er meget kritisk over for den israelske lobby i USA. Vi spurgte ham, om han mener, at Freemans beskyldning er rimelig.
Yes, I think that's fair. It's quite clear that the primary opposition to his appointment came from hardline supporters of Israel who worked very hard both in writing things against him but also pressuring congressmen to oppose his appointment.
Is the Freeman case, in fact, an example of how the Obama administration has given in to pressure from the Israel lobby?
That's not entirely clear. Freeman himself has not blamed President Obama for failing to support him, but it is quite clear that the White House did absolutely nothing to back his appointment or to push back against the campaign against him. So I would view this as a case where the Obama administration chose not to oppose the lobby and the pressure that they were putting on this particular appointment.
Some would say there is a lot of myth around the pro-Israel groups. How strong do you believe the Israel lobby is?
I think there's no question that they are one of the most important lobbying groups and interest groups in the United States. We're talking here about groups like AIPAC, like the Anti-Defamation League, some Christian evangelical groups such as Christians United for Israel. And although they don't control American foreign policy or even American Middle East policy, they have a very profound influence on what politicians are willing to consider and on the way we conduct our policy in that part of the world.
But where exactly is the Israel lobby using its influence?
They operate in a number of different ways. As you've just seen with the Freeman case, they work very hard to make sure that people whose views they don't like don't get important policy jobs, and people whose views they do like do get those kind of appointments. Second, they work the way lots of other interest groups work within the electoral system, backing candidates who support their views, putting pressure on senators and congressmen if they stray too far. And they also want to work very hard to shape public discourse in the United States, for example, putting pressure on newspapers and television stations not to publish or broadcast anything that's too critical of Israel. That's why you don't see the same kind of debate that you normally see in places like Denmark or England or even in Israel itself. They operate, again, the way other groups do in lots of different ways to try and preserve that special relationship between the United States and Israel.
So is it more pressure on the media than it is pressure on politicians?
I think it's both. I mean, and these things reinforce each other. The more you can shape public discourse in the United States, the more the American people will have sort of one view of the situation in the Middle East, and that, of course, then makes it much easier to put pressure on politicians. So it's really both strategies working together to try and make sure that the United States supports Israel no matter what it does, even when those policies aren't really good for Israel either.
Has the Israel lobby lost influence because of the war in Gaza?
The war in Gaza, I think, was a major blow in a number of ways. It started to be clear to lots of people that American policy was failing, that Israel's treatment of the Palestinians was indefensible, and that unconditional American support wasn't a good idea. And you started to see, I think, a more open discussion here in the United States, and even a more open discussion among various pro-Israel groups, some of whom are now beginning to realize that this special relationship actually isn't healthy for the United States or healthy for Israel as well. That what we really need is a more normal relationship where we can criticize them and they can criticize us, and we can have a more even-handed position in that part of the world.
But has it become easier or more acceptable to criticize Israel?
It has become slightly easier. You are seeing more people being willing to speak out and occasionally getting coverage and getting an audience. But as the Freeman case illustrates, there's clearly a price to be paid for departing from what has been the sort of standard consensus here. If Charles Freeman had not been as outspoken as he had been on this one issue, he would have sailed into this position without any trouble. And my great fear, of course, is that this example will have a chilling effect, that other people in Washington will decide that it's too risky to say what they really think on this issue. That's not healthy for the United States, and that's ultimately not healthy for Israel or for any other American friends in the region or even in Europe.
Thank you very much for joining us.